Hi, my name's Jason Guthrie. I graduated from high school in 91 and then went to Ohio University in Athens the following year as a music major. But after 1 year, I was not very focused and I was living in rural Ohio and didn't want to live there. So the military seemed like the best option for someone like me at the time. I thought, well, I can at least do this and then go back to college afterward. That was kind of like the way I was gaming it out in my head, was see the world without having to pay and then get an education. And maybe also to clear up whether or not I was gay or not. That was subtext though, because it was kind of just underneath. Because again, I didn't have a clear definition of that for myself yet. My parents, neither one were in the military. My grandfathers both were in. My dad's father was forced during World War II, and he was also in the United States Navy as I ultimately joined. When I was in boot camp, I was a little guy, soaking wet. I was probably like 95 pounds, tiny, and I was surrounded by like football players. So I felt a little out of place. Some people thought I was out of place. And then other people were like, oh no, come over here and hang out with us. You're among your people. So that kind of storyline took place at other places where I was stationed, where people kind of found me. Ultimately, I came out while I was active duty, and it was after I'd gone through boot camp and my A school, where they teach you how to be a yeoman and use your typewriter and do all the rules and regulations that you had to know administratively to do your job. So I went through all of that, and then it was at my first official duty station after all the training where I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gay. So it was, I flippantly will say this to friends, is that I went into the military to not be gay, and they proved that I was. So it was, I can laugh about it, but at the time it was hard. You know, I felt very isolated, and people knew. People weren't clueless. I think there were, for sure, commanders and captains who were watching out for me and saying, well, we're gonna just try and keep you on track here at work, and please be careful when you're not here. So that was because people, I think, were worrying about me a lot because, again, I don't know who I was fooling. During DC, during the Middle East, not really any issues. And then it was my third duty station where things started to go a little off the rails. So I did get hit on by a guy on the base one day, and I was minding my own business. But again, I'm thinking I'm like serving you whatever I was serving, but clearly I was sashaying right through the base exchange. And this guy like just came right up and was like, I think you're cute. And I was like, I don't even know what's happening right now. I'm in the grocery store on base and I'll get in trouble. And so we had kind of a clandestine affair, and it got found out. I brought my friend home, and my roommate came home unexpectedly. Events transpired where my roommate basically went to the command master chief and said, I want a room change. Again, don't ask, don't tell. I think in his own mind, maybe he was trying to do me a favor by not just saying, Jason had some strange man in the room in his bed. And then that escalated to a visit from legal. And so then I had to start going to the legal office, and they were like, so we understand that there was a stranger in your room on such and such date. And this is where don't ask, don't tell gets really gross. They couldn't ask me, is that your boyfriend? Are you gay? Like, they were just like, who's this person in your room? And I just went, deny, 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 deny. I think I went into legal for an interview like 3 times. And third time was the charm, I guess. I snapped. I was like, listen, the guy and I are kind of seeing each other. I'm gay. I like men. I can't deal with y'all and this mess anymore. And of course, everybody's sitting in the room looking at me like, and so it automatically triggered a process. And Uniform Code of Military Justice Article 14 at that time said, you know, if you're gay, you can't be here. Cut and dry. And I told, which violates don't ask, don't tell, but it was under intense pressure, I won't lie. It was bad. You know, I did the stuff, I marched through it, But it was a tough time, and it still affects me. I regularly talk with a superior of mine from when I was in Bahrain, and she kind of helps keep my brain right when I'm struggling in those moments where I'm like, man, why? Her statement to me in response to that was, the United States military failed you. You didn't fail them, they failed you. Their leadership failed you. And so, yeah, that's important for me to remember. I would certainly encourage people in the queer community to still serve in the United States military. For one thing, you're allowed to openly now, and that's super important. Be who you are, love who you are. If you love the United States and want to serve in the United States military, then do it.
My name is Jennifer Serene Henery, although I do like to go by Jenny. My dad was in the Navy, so I am a Navy brat. We went from Navy base to Navy base to Navy base, and then my dad left the Navy, we moved to Florida, and then I joined the Navy, went back to Great Lakes, Illinois, back to Capodichino, Italy, so retraced my steps. I came out to my family as trans twice before I joined the Navy. Once at 13, which did not work out well for me, and once at 17, and that worked out better, relatively. And I eventually, even with that coming out, I still made the decision to go back into hiding and join the Navy. My parents thought that I wasn't trans anymore. So my joining the military was an interesting decision. It was partially spurred because I wanted to be like my dad. Also, I joined the military because I wanted to save up money to transition and, do everything that I wanted to do to become a woman after the Navy. So I joined the Navy knowing that I was going to be leaving the Navy to transition. I was in the service during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I was in the service from 2005 to 2008. And it was very much something that was hanging over my head. This knowledge that if anyone knew, then I could be discharged. I could be court-martialed. I could get in a lot of trouble. I didn't know what kind. I just knew it would be bad. And eventually, I became very depressed while I was in the Navy because I was pretending to be something that I wasn't. And my chief petty officer sent me to see a therapist. And going to see that therapist was really scary because he was a lieutenant. And I went in front of him and he said, "Tell me what's going on. You're not allowed to leave until you tell me what's going on." So I had a choice. I could either lie or I could tell him that I was trans. Well, I am a really bad liar. So I ended up telling him. And it didn't work out badly because being trans is not covered under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Don't Ask, Don't Tell is only about sexuality. It is only about who you are having sex with or want to have sex with at that. Being trans has nothing to do with that, so we talked about it, and nothing happened, and I continued working, and eventually I went to him and I said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't handle pretending anymore. I need out. I need out of the military." And he discharged me medically, honorably. I went back to Florida, and the very first thing I did was come out. I changed my name. I started my transition full steam ahead. And it was a very long process. My goal at the time was surgery. I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about family or a house or anything. All I wanted was surgery. And without surgery, I was lost. At one point, I was saving up so that I could get surgery. And then my car died. and I had to get a new car, which meant I had to spend all of that hard-earned money that I was saving up for my surgery. And I thought it was going to be another 10 years before I could get that surgery. I was suicidal. I picked up drugs for the first time. I wanted to die. I didn't want to keep going. And it was my time in the Navy that saved me. There was a tragedy while I was in the Navy, and it earned me disability. So now I am a 50% disabled veteran. And I started receiving disability through the VA, and I did the math, and I realized I can get it. I can get my surgery. I can move on with my life. Oh my God, I can actually live. And I did that. I scheduled it and I got my surgery, and shortly after I got my surgery, I moved here to Columbus and met my now husband, bought our house. Now I'm gonna be adopting, and I'm actually happy now. That's amazing to me that trans people are allowed to transition in the military. I feel so happy for them that they can do that. And if I have any words of wisdom, it's that do what I couldn't. Be yourself.
Joe Whitaker, United States Navy. I served on active duty from 1967 to 1973. For 3 of those years, I flew electronic reconnaissance missions over Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, Vietnam. My squadron VQ-1 was based at the Republic of Vietnam Air Force facility in Da Nang, Vietnam. As a lieutenant in electronic warfare, I had a crew of 30 plus. We provided vital intelligence to support the war effort in Vietnam, as well as early warning for air-to-air and/or surface-to-air attacks on U.S. forces. During my tour of duty, over 55 men were killed. 31 were killed when a MiG-21 from North Korea shot down an EC-121 over the Sea of Japan. Only 2 bodies were ever found. This was an unprovoked attack against an unarmed reconnaissance aircraft. An additional 22 men were killed when a second EC-122 crashed on landing in Da Nang. And we had additional men who were killed when we were attacked on the ground in Da Nang, especially during Tet season. Also, our troops were exposed to Agent Orange, a toxic defoliant used around all the air bases in Vietnam. We had loss and sorrow every day. We only hoped that we'd make it out alive and return home to the safety and comfort of our families and communities. My reality was I returned to a hostile environment. Many Americans did not support the war effort in Vietnam and took it out on the returning vets. They shunned us, spit upon us, and called us baby killers because of the massacre at My Lai. It would be over 40 years before I would hear anybody say, "Thank you for your service." My exposure to Agent Orange resulted in a serious battle with skin cancer. I had over 12 surgeries on my face. Most of the left side of my face was removed, and to this day I get examined every 6 months and frequently have interventions, surgical interventions for minor issues related to skin cancer. I came home defeated and depleted. I was physically, mentally, and emotionally depleted. I was not the person I was when I left. I had no idea who I was or how I could fit in. I could not move forward and I could not go back. I drank every day and I fought suicide every single day for the decade of the 70s. I left for Vietnam as a closeted gay man. It was the 60s. It was not okay to be gay. Not okay to be gay with my family or in my community. I married my high school sweetheart and we had 3 children while we were overseas. I loved my wife and I loved my children, but I was living a lie. I now have a family crisis, an identity crisis, as well as PTSD and physical ailment. Wow. 2 profound things happened. Number 1, I told you I came home and I was defeated and depleted. My defenses were depleted. I could no longer live a lie. I could no longer hide. If I continued to live that lie, the inevitable would happen. so I had to change. Number 2, the men and women that serve and fight, at least ideologically, fight for freedom, for democracy, for the right to stand up and be heard and live as the person you are. We must continue that fight. We must respect that freedom that all of us fought for. Freedom is not a billboard. It's life and death to some of us. I would go back to Vietnam just to fight for the freedom to stand up and be heard as the person I am. We have put down the weapons, we have disembarked from the warships and the warplanes, but we must use that freedom and that power to vote. Vote for candidates who will support individual rights. Candidates who will support the rights of gay men and women to march down the street with their heads held high and proud. The rights of transgender brothers and sisters to live the life they were meant to have. The rights of women to make their own decisions about their health and welfare. And the right to ensure that on every day Black Lives Matter. I stand before you as an openly gay man. I have children who love me, a family that's proud of me, and a community that is loving and supportive of me as I am. I have the best the world has to offer because I chose to live, and I chose to live as the gay man I am. It has been over 50 years since these incidents happened, and I have a magnificent history. I have a magnificent history as a father, a brother, a son, a friend, a co-worker, and a shoulder to cry on. And soon I will be a husband. And now, with this award, this recognition that you give me, as you say thank you for your service, I can't wait to write the next chapter.
Hi, my name is Susanne South. So I was one of the crazy people that dove off the concrete towers for fun. And my coach recruited actually 2 of us out of a team of 7. And if we had the grades, he was pushing, this is an option, it's a great opportunity. Consider the military service and the academies as an option. And so 2 of us ended up at the Naval Academy from the team. I went into the Naval Academy at 17 and spent the 4 years there, out on ships and doing lots of training, and it was a very interesting experience. Once I got there, I discovered that my grandfather's grandfather had actually also gone to the school and had a family buried there on the academy grounds. So that was an interesting discovery that I didn't even know. My vision of being able to serve in the military and do something good for my country, that was where my heart was when I went in. Very different life at the school. I was the country cowboy girl, had no concept of politics in Washington and all the rest of the stuff that came with going to the academy. And that was where I started my journey. Even at the time that I went in, there were only a very small number of women that were accepted out in the military at all. Just trying to be accepted as a female in that environment was difficult. Being different in any other additional way just added to potential problems. So I dated guys several times while I was in the military. And it was one of those things where everybody else is doing it, so I should try it because, maybe I'm just missing something, right? I'm like, okay, no. When you graduate from the academies, you're dedicated for 6 years of additional service. And right at the end of my academy training, I had a medical problem come up. And so they couldn't decide, can they fix me? Can they not fix me? And like 2 weeks before graduation, they're like, okay, we give up. We don't think we can fix you. So they let me graduate. I was like, okay, I had a computer degree. They're like, we don't know what to do with a computer degree. Like, we can't put you on a ship, and that's the only place we know where to put computer people. So they assigned me to the medical center. And I stayed for many months there at the medical center helping them out with their computer work. And then they decided that they didn't know what else to do with me, so they sent me home. I wanted so bad to be an officer and do that job. And that was all I had been doing for almost 8 years, is planning, this is what I'm going to do. And having that just completely cut off was really shocking because I had no idea what to do with my life. I didn't discover the vocabulary of even how to express who I was until I moved here to Columbus, which was 20 years after I was out of the military. And when I first came here to Columbus, I was actually working in Nationwide downtown. And right across from Nationwide is, of course, the big conference center. And they had one of these conventions come in, and first room that you went by that was advertised, they were having a panel discussion for fiction writers on asexuality in fiction. And it's like, oh, I like that word. I've never heard that word. What is that? So I went out and Googled everything on the internet I could find about it. And it was the funniest thing because of like the 25 people in the room during the panel discussion, 10 of us showed up that identified as asexual. And I'd never met another person that identified that way. So it was an awesome both support session and education session for both the audience and the actual writers that were trying to find out, what does asexuality even mean? It's not celibacy, and it's not you. There were so many different things that people had in their minds about what it meant. So it was a really interesting experience, but being almost 40 before I even found the terminology was a very interesting experience. It's difficult to explain without the vocabulary that I'm an asexual but pan-romantic female. It's like, okay, people have no idea what that combination of words even means. And so it was very interesting when I started Googling and going, oh, that definition, that's me, that's how I feel inside. This word is what I am. And I didn't have that for most of my life. And when I joined JP Morgan Chase, there was all this, they have a lot of information out there on be your authentic self. They have a pride group there. And I was like, okay, do I belong? Because I'm not one of their letters. They say the A is allies, it's not my letter. So I'm like, okay. And so I went to a couple and I started asking, do I really belong to your group? So I've more aggressively started going to them going, okay, I do belong. Whether you think I do or not, I'm gonna make sure I do. And so, yeah, I've been more open and participating. You need to be out there to help others as well. And that fits in with my basic desire to help and serve others. And so I'm trying to more openly say, this is who I am, so that others can also feel comfortable being who they are.
My name is Joshua Jacob Hoffman. I was a member of the Mormon Church, so I had already served a mission. Prior to going on my mission, struggled with, do I go on my mission now or go in the military? Because I knew I wanted to ultimately go in the military. I went into service, it was October of 1984, and I went into the Air Force. And I went through basic training, and it was a tough time. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it. And when I was able to finally get through it, I was so extremely proud to wear my blues. It was like one of the proudest moments of my life at that time. I went into the Air Force knowing that I wanted to retire from the Air Force. My biological father was in the military, even though he was, to put it lightly, not a good example of a military man. But my great-grandfather and others were military and were honored for their services. I knew I was gay from the age of 5. And when I joined the church when I was 13, I was looking for something where I had a lot of religious questions, and none of the preachers could answer the questions. And when I came upon the church, they were answering questions where no other preachers could. And I followed the laws of the church literally. And so I pushed that down, way back in the far reaches of the closet. But again, I followed the letter, I followed the church rules because I believed most of what the church was saying. I was 25 when everything blew up in my face. And quite honestly, when at that point in time, still living the letter of the law to the church, I was still a virgin. In the Air Force, there was a Master Sergeant, Patricia Zuniga. I still remember her name. She was not very nice. Not nice at all. And she was trying to get with every man in the warehouse. I was a material facility specialist in one of the offices there. And she would close the door and wanted me to do it with her. And I was open the door and she'd close it again. And I finally told her she was crossing the line, so I knew I could, even though I was, an E2. And I said, listen, I am not going to serve you. I'm serving my country, period. She didn't like that. She didn't like me because she knew she wasn't going to get her way with me. She reported me as she would put it, you got a faggot in your midst. And They investigated me, interrogated me for over 6 hours, and put me through counseling, and then within about 2 weeks I was out for a less than honorable discharge. So I didn't tell anybody about my discharge, about me being in the military, because I was furious, I was embarrassed by it, and hated that I was even in it. You know, it's been really difficult. And my husband, he's the one that said, you have to get, you know, when Obama changed that, God love that man. And he's like, you deserve this. You need to change this. You deserve to get an upgrade. And so I'm like, so I gathered all the documents that had to be done and sent it into Texas. I won, and I got a new DD-214. My husband and I, we've tried to help kids. We've been foster parents for over 15 years now. We've had 63 kids through our home. We've adopted 5, and we've tried to help all of our kids stand tall, hold their head up high, and be proud of who they are, no matter all the trauma that they've been through. When I got out of the military, I lost everything, everything. The church turned away from me, lost the military, everything. But I look back now, after my head's cleared, and I would not change what I have. I would not give up. I go back and change something which would ultimately erase having my husband or my boys. Because they are my life.
Hi, my name is Joshua Snyder-Hill. Steve and I actually met right around June, Pride, a little bit before, of 2010. And so we actually only dated for 6 months before he got deployed. And then we dated for an additional 6 months while he was deployed. He was deployed for a year, but halfway through, you get to come home for a leave, and we got married on his leave. So we were together for a year before we got married. I had family who's in the military. Both my grandparents were. They both served. I had an uncle who served. And so you get this kind of like jovial version of what a military family is. They tell you all the fun stuff. They tell you all the goofy stuff, but you don't ever know the dark part. And so I think, you know, knowing Steve was in the military didn't really scare me until he got deployed. And then the first time the realization hit me, A, of what deployment meant, and B, what it meant to be an LGBT couple under Don't Ask, Don't Tell and DOMA, was when I said goodbye to him. We had to hide underneath an escalator and hug each other. And most of the time what happens is all these couples meet at the airport and they create a network. You meet yellow ribbon families. And so they contact each other. They are part of Facebook groups. They give each other updates in case they don't all get to connect all the time. And I couldn't be part of that. And I remember like walking away and watching him go towards this big crowd of people that were figuring out how to connect and support each other. And I'm like bawling, like in the middle of an airport by myself, because we can't be seen, you know, together. I felt bad because it was almost more anger and frustration than anything, than being supportive sometimes about what he was going through. It was kind of like it was a weird feeling. At this point, we had a light at the end of the tunnel with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So we knew its end was coming. And then the presidential election came, and Republicans decided that they would make it part of their platform to reinstate Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so Google had decided that they would have a situation where the Republican candidates would be on stage and people could submit questions. And so while Steve was deployed, he decided to submit a question about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. When he originally submitted it, he just filmed from his chest down because he didn't want his identity shown. And Google said, hey, if you want to submit this question, we need to see your face. And I remember that was the first time that he and I, we had it out. I remember we were on Skype and I was like, you have to do this. This is important. You are going to challenge those people on the stage. They're telling you you're not in danger. And he's like, but I can be. If they reinstate this law, I will be in danger. I will have outed myself. And I said, but what happens if you don't? If this question isn't asked, what happens? because if nobody challenges them, then everything continues to go forward. And I remember he was really upset and told me no, and then decided he wanted to do it and show his face. And that was the kind of back and forth we had to figure out as a couple, to like how do we push each other, and how do we kind of, I guess, bargain and give up for each other to figure out what's the right approach. And I'll never forget when the question came up, I just remember like the idiotic moment of like standing up and screaming, and I was by myself. And it's weird because that was like the beginning of a snowball, where I was like, holy crap, like this is a big deal. And it kind of propelled us as a couple to go forward to just be unforgivably obnoxious about who we were as a couple. And it's cool because if I think about like the proudest and happiest moments, they happen with Steve. So that was like the beginning of us, just causing trouble. What was really interesting about the military, and kind of like the respect that I have for it as an organization, is once Don't Ask, Don't Tell was lifted, it was just like a switch was flipped. The only thing that really held back that camaraderie between LGBT couples, in my opinion, and straight couples was the law. Like nobody really cared. There were people that were on base that knew, and the minute that he came out in the debate, there were people that came to him for support because they were so excited to see that they had somebody to lean on, because they had to keep it so quiet. So the only thing that really ever caused that rift for the LGBT couples was people who upheld hateful laws. What words of wisdom would I give? When I saw the level of pride that he had as a person who served, right? 30 years in the military, not wanting to be deployed, but deploying because that was his responsibility. If you figure out how to mimic that in the bond that you two create, and that commitment that you two make, you are seriously never going to be happier or stronger than you've ever been.